What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. It's not Monday. It's not Tuesday. It is Wednesday night. And we are finally back here on Tonight in Haddonfield. And as you guys can see, my co host has returned. He is back. So we'll take a moment to welcome back Sean, everybody. Happy to have him back. Happy to get an update on his condition. Thank you right off the top to our patrons, channel sponsors, all the good people that contribute and help the channel, do what we do and help us grow every week so that we can come back and do this show for you guys every week. So without further ado, welcome back, Sean. Give us an update and tell us what we need to know.
Well, thanks for having me. Voice is a little hoarse, which is, as far as I know, knock on wood, nothing to do with the heart attack. I think I just caught my kid's cold at a not great time. So apologize for that, although maybe a little bit of a raspier voice isn't a bad thing. Yeah, so I guess first, right off the bat, thanks to you and Randy last week.
Yep.
Boy, did I need something to watch before going in for that procedure Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say it's been smooth sailing since then, but it hasn't been. But I'm here, and I'm happy to be here. We'll see how long the show goes. I don't think people understand when there's only two people doing a show, how much oxygen you use. And I have a tendency to ramble and carry on, and that's probably not something that's going to be in the cards for me for a little bit. But I think it was also important, while speaking with the doctors, to return to some level of normalcy and get out of my own head a bit. So here I am. Thank you to everybody who reached out, and it really is appreciated. If I didn't reach out to you individually, my apologies. It's a little overwhelming, but it's not, unappreciated. And we got a really exciting, show tonight with a lot to discuss. And, for a second, I thought it was going to be a lot more to discuss, to be honest. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But just a reminder for people that tune into the channel, if you're not just into Halloween and horror, we got a couple of review series coming up. And they are House of the Dragon, which we will be doing instant reactions to on Sunday nights, starting, I think it's June 16th. And then Star Wars The Acolyte, which starts this upcoming Tuesday. So really excited for that.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. All right. So we've got a few things that we're going to mention and talk about and get into and discuss tonight. We're going to tackle Mike Flanagan's involvement with the Exorcist after David Gordon Green's exit and his involvement with Blumhouse. We're going to get into some details and nitty gritty about that. The Halloween series rumor is Loomis the Focus. So we're going to tackle that, talk about how much he may or may not be involved. I'm going to bring you guys a show and tell, and then we are finally going to deliver somewhat of a Terminator review for you all. We haven't been able to get it done on Reel Flix, and it's been ready and waiting, so we figured why not use this platform tonight and get into that. And then we will get into Sean, thanking sponsors and our patrons, and a content update for the upcoming weeks before we wrap things up later. So, Sean, where do you think we should start? What do you want to get into first?
Well, I think the Flanagan stuff is interesting because we talked about The Exorcist at length on the channel. A huge Flanagan guy, really like what he does. But obviously the what was it classified as, the Exorcist Believer trilogy?
Yeah.
Is I think we can officially say now, even though we alluded to it months ago, that's dead, and we're getting a fresh start. How do you feel about it, man? I know you weren't as critical on the movie as a lot of other people were.
Right.
But I also feel like a guy like Flanagan comes in, he probably needs to not continue off of, or at least continue directly off of someone's work.
Yeah. Believer was not well received at all. I'm in the minority camp of, I understand the hate of it and why people were very disappointed, but I went in with very low expectations and kind of just gave it a chance. It's not great, but I didn't feel like it was this huge disaster that a lot of people made it out to be. Um, but it doesn't and won't ever hold a candle to the original. Um, After seeing it and hearing the kind of the backlash and the reviews from audience and critics, it's not that surprising to me that the trilogy got put on hold and then initially shelved. And then we hear about David Gordon Green's exit. So, after his handling of the Halloween trilogy, which kind of I think was a slow decline, I think people expected that with The Exorcist. And then when he really didn't deliver on the first chapter, like I think a lot of people had hopes for, kind of set them up for a bit of failure. So, with that being said, I'm very curious to see what Flanagan comes in and does. Um, he's a fantastic writer, fantastic writer. He's got some great programs out there. Sean's a big fan of the guy. He's kind of put me onto him. So I've heard he is writing and directing this next installment, and it's going to be like some sort of radical change. So I'm open minded on it. I kind of hold The Exorcist pretty near and dear. So as long as it's good, as long as it's kind of along the lines and keeping the DNA of what The Exorcist is, I'm willing to give it a chance and give it a shot with hopes that we get a good product. So my hopes are there.
The only thing I worry about is, a mistake that, I've made far too many times is biting off more than you can chew.
Hmm.
And he's already doing that Stephen King movie, Life of Chuck, which has an A-list cast. I know he's started work on an untitled series with that Amazon deal he signed.
Hmm.
And now we're going to add The Exorcist to it.
Right.
It's a lot for one guy. Obviously, he has a
Mhm.
team, but it's still a lot.
Yeah. That's three big projects. His involvement in all, I'm not fully aware of. Like, I don't know if he's writing, directing all of them, or his capacity of involvement. So, but like you said, it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to take on. Hopefully he kind of gets his ducks in a row so that he can focus where he needs to accordingly, and doesn't kind of get overload and get too overwhelmed with all of these projects that he's going to be taking on. So, like I said, hopeful for The Exorcist. That won't be for a while. I don't predict that until late 2025, maybe 2026. So, we'll see how that goes. And I'm interested to see the um, the projects that come up before that. So, fingers crossed. I'm hoping it all goes well, and I think it's in the right hands when you put it in the ball in Flanagan's court.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Flanagan is like, look, people love working with this guy, but he's very picky about who he works with.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how the cast shapes up. Obviously, first and foremost, the story, but I think the people that bring you that story are almost equally as important. And we'll see what happens. But um, I like the move. I would have rathered him be doing something in Halloween, but
Yeah.
it makes me more interested in what comes next, because I got to tell you, I was in no rush to see Believer, and I had no interest in what came next.
Yeah. You're not missing much with Believer. Some glorified cameos of some legacy characters, a story that is somewhat fitting to a demonic possession, but it leaves a lot to be desired, and some interesting choices that didn't really sit well with audiences. So, like I said, I don't mind it as much as the rest, but I can totally understand the backlash and the disappointment from it. Um, but yeah, I would have really liked to see Flanagan take on some kind of Halloween project. But this, however, dipping his toe into this realm of horror, not that he hasn't done horror inspired or horror esque, projects and pieces before. He could, this could open some doors, and who knows what the future holds. He could maybe get called upon to eventually come in and work on a Halloween project. So hopefully, if all goes well, and The Exorcist goes over well, and we get the next 2 chapters from him, that could open the door. So we will see. We will see. Um, yeah. So anything else you want to tackle here with Flanagan and the Exorcist, or?
Yeah, I just again, I'm cautiously optimistic for it. I would say
Mhm.
maybe excited's too strong. I do feel like when you do one movie and then come back with a completely different movie in a very short time span, the interest isn't necessarily there, even if it is something completely different.
Yeah. Burnout, as I like to refer to it as, you do get a lot of burnout if you kind of get stuff one behind the other a little too fast. So, with the Halloween trilogy, I kind of felt that burnout a little bit. 2018 was a good kickoff. Made me excited for Kills, and then we get the debacle of Halloween Ends. So, that's unfortunate. But with those movies happening kind of so quick behind each other, I totally get the burnout and wanting to kind of take a breather from things like that. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. Like I mentioned a couple times already, I have hopes for Flanagan coming in and doing a bang up job with The Exorcist. So, with that being said, let's shift gears maybe a little bit and get into this Halloween series rumor. Some juicy stuff came out about Loomis and his possible or likely involvement and what capacity that might be in. So, Sean, if you want to catch us up a little bit, I think you have a little more detail on that than I did.
So funny enough, you and I were talking the other day, and I said, you know, I had heard we might get some news soon, and I was kind of hoping it was going to drop on that day. I think it was Monday. Um,
Okay.
and then a few hours later, that rumor about Loomis came out.
Hmm.
And the rumor essentially is that we would see a series that starts in 1963 and focuses on not just Loomis and Michael, but how he gets involved in the case
Ah.
and then would progress forward. Now, whether that comes to be or not, I'm not sure. I think,
Mhm.
maybe we start there, dude. Is that something you want to see? Or do you want it just to be touched on briefly and spend more time with the shape per se?
I kind of fall in the middle with that. I love the idea of going back, seeing how Loomis got involved. How did he even get assigned to the case of Michael? Maybe his observations. We get details on what he notices. Is this, a drastic difference from the average 6-year-old child? Or, does he notice a fine line between somewhat of normalcy, but what drove him to do what he did? Um, so it's an interesting avenue to go and explore. However, I don't want them to open that door too far. I don't want them to go into the backstory of Michael, uncover too much, and give us way too much about his backstory and kind of almost ruin the mystery of why Michael does what he does. What set him off? What was that trigger, as he was a kid? So I hope they toe that line very finely and can kind of find a happy medium where they're going to give us some of that and still keep the mystery alive. Don't don't uncover too much. I think when you get into that, you're starting to toy with details that a lot of the fans would rather not know. And you never know what they might come up with. We might get explanations and things that to the fan base maybe don't make sense, and it's not something that we're looking to hear about, to know about, and just things we don't want uncovered. So um, it's a fine line. I just hope it's handled carefully, and not too much is given away.
Yeah, I spoke with someone today actually, and the consensus he had was, um, it's certainly possible that we go back to Loomis and how he gets involved with Michael and etc. But to go back to 1963 is going to cost a lot of money.
Mhm.
You're gonna, well, depending on how long it is, right? Or you're going to spend a couple episodes of a series, and let's say it's 8 episodes, and 2 of the episodes take place in 1963. Just to shoot those 2 40 to 60-minute episodes, if you're really trying to make it feel like 1963, it's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's probably more conventional ways about going and telling that story, even though I would rather them go back to 1963. I think we all know how penny pinching studios can be right now, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. I just think it's more likely that we're going to see it take place in a different time.
Yeah. I think if they're smart and they're creative enough, they can create maybe like the atmosphere of 63 without spending, too much on the budget on recreating, that time period. Maybe do flashbacks, set it within Smith's Grove, and then they can kind of build a set that just kind of looks very similar to what we saw in the original 78 and even in Halloween 2 when they do the flashbacks to Michael being, locked away in there. You can set the room up, or even take a page from Rob Zombie where we see him, in a room at a table. Loomis is recording, and he's studying Michael. He's talking to him. He's trying to get inside of his mind. If you don't go too crazy with really trying to recreate 63, I think that's a way you can do it. That would be a lot more budget friendly. You just need one set, one area, make it reminiscent of the 60s, and not spend too much time there. That way you're not kind of blowing a ton of your budget trying to recreate 63. It'd be a smart way to do it. Like I said, they got to get creative with it, but it's definitely an idea that they have to keep in mind because of budget. So I love the idea of going back to 63. It's always been an interest of mine. We haven't seen a whole lot with 63. But yeah, like you mentioned, budget is an issue and you don't want to go crazy. So, they have to toe that carefully as well.
Look, at the end of the day, I think anybody who's worried about, not seeing the Shape in his glorious white mask or some version of it, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I don't believe they would go and make a series where, that doesn't play a significant role. But make no mistake, they're not just going out here to do the same thing over again. They want to do something new, or at least from a different perspective, and present it in a way that it hasn't been presented before. And I know people will point to Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, but I think that's something else entirely, in my opinion. So, and then, Steph Hutchinson's work, pardon me,
Yeah.
comes to mind, and how many different ways he's utilized Loomis, and, the chance that he's possibly involved with this too. So, I think there's hope. I think there's a lot of positive to take from it. I don't know how much I'd read into the 63 rumor, though. I don't want it to be wishful thinking. I don't want people to get their expectations up. I would love for it to happen. I think it would be amazing to go back and, retell that story in a different way. I do think if they are, whether it's 1963 or 1993, I think that people shouldn't expect the same events. Like, I don't think you should expect the same people who died in the first movie to reappear in this series and die the same way or die at all. The further we get into this thing and, what little has come out, the more it sounds like it's going to be along the lines of something Steph Hutchinson already proposed before and was working on actively. So I believe we've talked about it, the reboot trilogy, if you will.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I wish there was more to give, and we will be keeping this episode on the shorter side of things. But if you have any questions, comments, or even your own ideas, please feel free to put them in the chat. We've spent so much time away from Loomis, and I know people will say, well, he had a role to play in the new movies, and albeit minor, they did find a way to use him. When's the last time he was truly a focus?
Yeah.
Halloween 6, in my opinion. You could say zombies movies, but like that's kind of like a different take on the character completely. Not saying the next take won't be different, but I don't think you'll be writing an entirely different character.
Yeah. It sounds like they want to tap into what was original, but kind of take the Steph Hutchinson role and kind of branch off and create something new. They don't want to retread ideas that we've already seen. things that we've already heard and try to just expand on existing ideas. It kind of looks like they want to start from scratch and they want to take things into their own direction while still tapping into what we do already know. So it's an interesting take on it. I'm open to it. 63, like I said, I would love it. Recreating that, you have to get creative. Um, but I'm looking forward to whatever it is that they do come up with. Handle characters carefully. If you're bringing in Loomis, that's a big one. The casting's got to be right. Writing his character has to be right. Let's not stray too far away. I saw something today from someone that says they would like to see some wild changes with Loomis, and I'm in the camp that is basically that's too much of an iconic character to toy with and change way too much. I think that's kind of a negative or a bad direction to go because he's already kind of like a staple of this franchise. You can't stray away from that too much. You have to kind of keep his DNA where it is, and you do want to expand, but a drastic change that's not going to get well received, I don't think, by the fan base. And if you want to see people turn on this thing fast, go ahead and change Loomis on like a high level, and you're going to lose a lot of your audience and your fan base pretty quick. So Loomis, if anybody, has to be handled very, very carefully. Let's address this from Wayne. I think a couple of episodes where Judith Meyer's diary is found could give a lot of insight into 63. That's an idea that Wayne's had for a while that me and him have like briefly discussed. I think that's very fitting, especially for the time. What did teenage girls do back then? They kept a diary. They wrote their thoughts down. Whether it was daily and whatever, but that right there, I think that can introduce some really, really cool ideas, maybe some insight, not only into 63, but if Judith had started to notice things about Michael and wrote them in her diary, right there, you have some sort of piece of evidence that maybe gets into Loomis's hands. And maybe it's him going through the diary while examining Michael and going over, trying to figure out what makes him tick or whatever. And it gives him, ideas and insights and things to look for. So, great idea, I think, coming from Wayne. Something I would definitely be open to seeing.
Dustin says he just hopes the show happens, given what happened with Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
It's a valid concern, man.
Mm-hmm.
Every production now is at risk. Warner Brothers scaled back on House of the Dragon, a Game of Thrones product, and those couldn't be more successful than what they've been. Yeah. It's always possible, which is why I think keeping costs low is going to be really important.
Yeah, budget's a big thing to have to worry about. We kind of harp on that a lot. So paying attention to what happened with Crystal Lake, and even the budget thing and like the financial return is something that Paramount or New Line is concerned with when it comes to Friday the 13th. So that's one reason we're not getting anything with Friday the 13th, which kind of sucks, but that's where they're at. But all right, let's shift gears here. Let's move things along. Sean, if you can cue me up and get me ready. There we go. I'm going to hit you guys with a sort of quick and brief, but a brand new release for Show and Tell this week. So without further ado, let's get into some show, share, and slash. All right. So I have a new release here from Scream Factory, brand new 4K. This is not out quite yet, but as I mentioned before, if you order from Scream Factory, you tend to get their stuff pretty early. And in this case, I got this about 10 to 12 days, maybe about 2 weeks early. So brand new 4K collector's edition. This was out of print for a long time. Happy to get this back. And what I have here is Scream Factory's brand new 4K of Species 2. Long time out of print Blu-ray, was selling for in the $80 to $100 range. It was tough to get your hands on. There was a import box set from I believe it was 88 films. They did Species 1 through 4. It was Region B locked, so if you don't have a Region B player, you were kind of shit out of luck. So luckily, Scream Factory dove into their back catalog, and they brought us Species 2 back. So happy to add this into my collection. Gave this a watch last night. 4K transfers, pretty good. Nothing that really blew my mind or, was over the top about this, but, it cleaned up well. It looks really good. There's certain shots that do stand out. But the disappointing thing for me with this was no Atmos. That was until I put it on. Once I put this on and kind of got into the movie, I was very surprised that the 5.1 audio track that they kept intact here sounds as good as it does. So I think this is something that didn't really warrant getting an Atmos upgrade. So, at first, a little bit of disappointment that it wasn't featured. However, the existing audio track does a damn good job of bringing some quality sound to this release. Standard slipcover, as Scream Factory typically does. Same artwork, front and inside cover. No reversible artwork on this, unfortunately. 2-disc release, Blu-ray and a 4K. The Blu-ray comes with the brand new 4K scan. I believe this does have a Dolby Vision upgrade as well, so you do get Dolby Vision. There is your disc art. Not too much going on. And then your back cover. Oh, I got some glare. I will touch on all that momentarily. It's all your special features. I only see one listed new feature, which is just the new scan. So nothing new in the realm of special features. But what they do include is a commentary with Peter Medak. From Syl to Eve, an interview with actress Natasha Henstridge. So she reprises her role as the alien, but she comes back as a clone and a new version from the first movie. So it's a slight change, but basically all the characteristics are there. Same character and same actress. So it's good to see her come back. Creature Creations, interviews with Creature and special makeup effects artist Steve Johnson, and more. Alien Evolutions, an interview with screenwriter Chris Brancato, special effects outtakes and behind-the-scenes footage, scenes from the film featuring uncut, not shown in theaters, so you do get some uncut footage on here. That's a feature I have to check out. Species 2, Eve of Destruction. That's a, I guess, a behind-the-scenes featurette or featurette just about the movie itself. Theatrical trailer, still galleries, which include behind-the-scenes photos and production sketches. So, still a lot to offer on this brand new release. This releases June 11th from Scream Factory. It's currently up for pre-order. Amazon, probably Walmart, Target, your online retailers, Diabolic DVD, Orbit DVD, and all of your other outlets where you are ordering your physical media from. So you got about 2 weeks before this finally hits stores. If you are a collector like me, you want to add this in your collection, I would recommend it if you're into kind of the alien sci-fi horror. It's a fun 90s flick, a lot of action in this, a lot of adult content. So be wary of that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this week's segment of Show, Share, and Slash with Scream Factory's brand new Species 2 4K. Whew, that's a lot of talking. I think you're muted.
Sorry, man. Yeah, I definitely gotta pace myself.
Yeah,
probably would have been okay yesterday, but whatever this cold is, it's not fun. So,
yeah,
on top of everything else, but I believe I think what we're gonna do is Terminator's next, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna take a little break and come back in about 2 minutes with our review of James Cameron's The Terminator, and this will be one of 4 parts that we're doing: T1, T2, T3, and Salvation.
Yep.
We'll be back. And we are back with James Cameron's The Terminator. Now, I think with this franchise, at least for the overwhelming majority, people prefer T2. You know, and I get it. T2 was revolutionary when it came out.
Oh, yeah.
That's a film a lot of people go back to. So, like, I get it. I totally understand. But for me, man, I prefer T1. And I think the number one reason for that is Kyle Reese. I don't think Kyle Reese's character is ever really, truly replaced until Salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like, I like that it's a little smaller and tight knit and not as like this grand blockbuster. And I love the cinematography in it. You know, the streets are it's the 1980s. It'd be so hard to recreate.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the scenes that we see in that movie today, just because not a lot of streets look like that anymore. So, this is a big win for me, man.
Yeah.
Honestly, we watched the first half of this movie while I was in the hospital. It was nice to get the distraction, and then watch the second half of the movie when I got out. And to this day, man, it's a movie that I thoroughly enjoy, and you know, Linda Hamilton in it is, you know, she's really good, and Arnold's probably the most different in this movie compared to the other movies. And then, you know, some of the practical effects are a little dated. You know, I don't remember the Terminator looking that bad. He loses all of his skin. And there's some shots of Arnold that are clearly not Arnold.
Yeah.
But all in all, man, I think it tells a really good story. And considering when this movie came out and what it was made for, I thought they did the best they could with the futuristic stuff.
Yeah. You know, I gave this a lot of high ratings when I kind of broke down categories and went through. I got a lot of 8s and 9s, no 10s. And I think I have 1 7 in here for suspense, because it brings a really good suspenseful atmosphere in a lot of those chase scenes. So I will begin with my overall. My overall for this movie, it was an ace for its time. You know, it was way ahead of its time for 80s filmmaking. You know, there are some horror elements kind of thrown in there. That's well known, is that Cameron, you know, had the idea of coming up with the antagonist very similar to a slasher. You know, chasing down his victims and his prey, and really just being like unstoppable. You know, in his pursuit of his victims. You know, and we clearly see that. It just there's so much sci-fi, you know, atmosphere to the rest of this movie that it kind of outweighs the horror aspect for me. You know, I've mentioned that multiple times. So, like I've said before, you know, I get the whole horror aesthetic, but you know, I lean way more sci-fi action with this. But you do get a lot of POV, so you get a lot of POV shots. I love the way that they did the red and the computer with him, you know, and the tracking and all of that stuff in the POV. You know, like I mentioned, way ahead of its time for 1984 and you know, the decade of the 80s with that style of filmmaking. So it definitely set the bar very, very high. We're going to give Sean a minute.
You know, it'd been a long time since I seen Terminator from '84, and you know, I think I too leaned more of, or not I too, but for me, I used to consider it, you know, a little bit horror, and then after watching it now for the first time in probably 15 years, yeah, no, I'm more in line with you. Even though there's some uneasy elements of it, and I think most of those, I think the real uneasy stuff's towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely more, you know, sci-fi thriller than it is horror.
Right.
But again, you know, I can't remember the doctor's name. I know he's in the next couple of movies too, but
Oh, right.
man, that guy's a fucking dick. Like,
yeah. Satisfying when Sarah finally gets her hands on him in T2, and she breaks out and she kind of holds him hostage. You're finally like, finally, the fucking dick of a guy finally gets what he deserves.
And he's even a bigger dick there. So
That indeed.
yeah, so I dig this movie. I would highly recommend anyone who hasn't seen the Terminator movies to, in my opinion, I still think the best timeline is T1 through Salvation.
Mhm.
And then depending on how you look at Salvation, does it happen before T1? Does it happen after T1? Well, it's kind of both, right? So,
Yeah.
So yeah, I dig it. Cinematography is great. The score, very 1980s, lots of synth.
Yep.
What's not to love about that? But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, if I'm going to touch on score really quick, if I was to define the 80s, I would say take Halloween 2, Killer Clowns, and Terminator from 84 and just listen to the scores of that movie, and it's defines the 1980s and the sound and what they could bring to film and cinema through the 80s. I think I own 2 out of the 3 soundtracks. I don't have a Terminator soundtrack yet, so I will put it on my to-do list of pickups to expand my soundtrack collection. I will save my ratings for the end, but I do have a couple of standout scenes that I will mention that maybe you can chime in on briefly if you're up for it. First one, the Tech Noir shootout. Action packed, and we just talked about score. So, what other better place to bring it up than here? That score really picks up during that scene, and you have him finally like in pursuit with the right Sarah Connor. After he was going through the phone book and tracking them down and kind of killing them off one by one, he finally tracks her down in this club, and we finally see his first big pursuit, and then you get the big shootout with Kyle and the Terminator for the first time.
Yeah, that was a big one. Um, the atmosphere of it. Yeah, I'm only 35 years old, so I wasn't around. I don't know what it was like to be in a club back then, but very cool the way it's presented.
Mhm.
And it's suspenseful. And I
Yeah.
think that's important. It's action packed, but they still find a way to have suspense in there.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, the mastery of James Cameron. So I really dug that. If I had one standout scene, to be honest, it's probably the police station. Everything that goes down there. It's
Mhm.
I know you're on full action at that point, but
Yeah.
like he just mows through them, runs over the guy at the desk.
Yeah. It's a relentless pursuit, and that is the second one I had to mention. So that's a good pass off right into the next one. So yeah, I said it's probably one of the best mass casualty scenes shot in the 80s. He just, like you said, he's just mowing through them one by one, just taking every living thing in his path out through that whole police station. There's some suspense factor with Sarah hiding while he's trying to track her down, and then the score picks up as they eventually kind of make their way out, and they're on the escape route, and then the whole place is on fire, and it's up in flames, and they hightail it out of there, and now you have a chase in the streets. So I love the police station assault. It's great piece of action, a little bit of suspense in there, and definitely, like I said, for me, a big standout. Next one I have is the hotel escape chase, which is another chase scene. He tracks them down after ambushing the room. It leads to a highway chase. He's thrown off the bike and then run over by a tanker, and then just gets up, and we start to see the endoskeleton come out. The skin is ripping away, and you're starting to reveal the layers of what this thing really is. He takes over the truck. He's still in pursuit, and then Kyle throws an explosive into the back of it and just explodes the entire thing. Um, Huge, great practical effect. I think, if I remember correctly, the way they shot that was scaling it down with models, and then camera tricks to make it look the correct scale and size, and then they did it practically, blew up the model, and if you look really close on like a higher definition version, you can kind of tell where they sort of green screened Sarah running away from the truck before it blows up, and then it explodes in the background. So yeah, you get that, and all of a sudden this machine just rises out of the flames and is still in pursuit. So yet another fantastic, I think, chase scene and action sequence in this movie.
So I don't know if we talked about this beforehand, but let's try to rank these out of 10. But
Okay.
before I do,
Yeah.
just wanted to point out one of my favorite things about the movie, and it's a lot of people's least favorite things about the movie, is he doesn't just show up back to meaning the Terminator. He doesn't just show up back there and start killing everybody in his sight like a lot of people want him to do.
Yeah.
Because that would make his job harder.
Right.
It would make finding Sarah harder. You know, as powerful as Terminators are, at the end of the day, you know, enough people can stop one.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's just making a massacre of everywhere he goes and every single innocent person, like how many people does he let go in that movie? Lots,
Mm-hmm.
tons. So it's a small detail, but one that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of it's the term I'm looking for. Oh, it's getting away from me. But he kind of picks, chooses his targets, and he makes sure that he's on track to find Sarah, and not just taking kind of just random independent casualties along his way. Attention to detail, I guess, is the best way I would say it. You know, he's got a target, he's got a focus. You know, it's even a smart approach. You know, this is a machine in the 80s. It's obviously way technologically advanced. It finds a phone book, goes through a phone book, and starts going through names, and it you know, kind of narrows it down like that until he eventually finds Sarah. But he's in the bar, and he's in an entire crowded club full of people, and yet he's focused on finding Sarah. So you got a whole bar full of people that were let go, and even a handful, from what I remember, throughout the rest of the movie. So if you want, I can get into my ratings. Cinematography, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Score, I did a 9 out of 10. Suspense was a 7 out of 10. Action was a 9 out of 10. The storyline, which we haven't really touched on much, but you know, a great story told throughout the whole runtime of the movie. I gave that a 9 out of 10. Special effects, which I noted here, were done by Stan Winston and company back then. 9 out of 10 on the special effects. They go really heavy on the practical. You mentioned some are a little bit dated, but I love the balance of practical and stop motion. There's a lot of stop motion that was used that I think they pulled off very well. Sound design, I did an 8 out of 10, and pacing, I said it was pretty well paced at an 8 out of 10 between the story development of the current movie that's taking place and like the flashbacks and flash forwards into like the future war, into I think it's 2029 when all this is taking place in the future. So I really like the balance of the pacing. So yeah, that was another standout for me. And yeah, I mean, overall, like I mentioned in the beginning, this movie's just it's an ace of its time. You know, a staple of the 80s and a fantastic piece of 80s filmmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wish I could sit here and say I have scores for each individual category, but
That's all
it's
right.
not something that I've given thought to.
Mhm.
But I give the first Terminator an 8 out of 10. I
Oh
think
yeah,
it's a really, really good movie. And I think it's one of those movies where if you haven't seen it ever, you need to see it. Don't just go to
absolutely.
T2. Watch
No,
T1.
yeah, absolutely. T2 is a huge, fun blockbuster action film, but if you want something along the lines of horror, still very action based, and you know, like I said, tells a really good story across the whole runtime. You know, give the first Terminator a chance. It's a classic. I think it comes highly regarded by a lot of people, a lot of film fans across horror and, you know, sci-fi and action. So it's definitely worth checking out. It's worth your time. I think comes in a little over 90 minutes, so it's not an overly long watch, but it might get a little bit closer to the 2 hour mark. But yeah. Unless there's anything else, Sean, I say we wrap this thing up and let's close this out.
Yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, support us on Patreon. Big thanks to our channel sponsors, Jesse Storytime Spectacular, Backtrack Cinema, Chris Christensen, Matt Whitfield, Ryan from Colleague Nation. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. And our patrons, again, we don't take you for granted. And just thank you to Dean, and obviously I'm not quite me yet, but
We'll
doesn't
get there.
help that I have a cold at the moment. But we'll get there, and I just really appreciate the support. It means a lot, and bring on next week. Oh, T2 next week too, by the way.
T2, yeah, for sure. Definitely looking into or looking forward to getting back into that. Haven't watched T2 in a number of months, so I do have a 4K. It's kind of on the fence as one of the worst 4Ks ever put out, but I kind of look past the issues with it. It's a Cameron 4K, but I still think it delivers a really good presentation of the movie. So I am definitely looking forward to popping that in and getting back into that. And without further ado, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition, Wednesday night, of Tonight in Haddonfield. So like Sean mentioned, thank you to everybody that came out. Thank you to all the channel sponsors. We're happy you guys come out and join us every week. And we will be back very, very soon within a few days' time. So until next time, have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
Have come here, but now they're gone. Seasons don't fear the reaper, nor do the wind, the sun.